Welcome to the Music Row Walking Tour. I'm Don Cusick, and I'll be your guide. If you parked at the parking garage at the Music Row roundabout, known as Buddy Killen Circle, walk across the street, careful to watch for cars, to the city park between Music Square East and West. Buddy Killen Circle is named after a music publisher. We'll hear about him a little later. The statue you see in the middle of the roundabout is called Musica. Pause until you get across the street at the park. You are standing in Owen Bradley Park, named after the father of Music Row. The statue you see of a man playing the piano is Owen Bradley, who was a big band leader for radio station WSM during the 1940s. As recording companies began to record in Nashville after World War II, Owen worked with Paul Cohen of Decca Records, helping organize sessions, hire musicians, and find songs. Artists they work with include Red Foley, Ernest Tubb, and Kitty Wells. Owen and his brother Harold decided to open a studio and bought a house on Music Square East, then called 16th Avenue South, which was the first studio on what became known as Music Row. We'll see that later. Now, let's walk south, up Music Square West, which is the way the traffic is going. Pause until we get to the first building on the left side of the street. The first building on the left side, number 2 Music Square West, is ASCAP, a performance licensing organization, or PRO. A PRO collects money for songwriters and publishers from radio and television stations. They are a collection agency and very important in the lives of songwriters and publishers whose livelihoods depend upon these monies being collected and sent to them. The next building on your left is Sony Tree Publishing at number 8. Remember Buddy Killen? Well, at one time he owned Tree Publishing, which was sold to Sony in 1988. Tree was founded by Jack Stapp and Lou Cowan. Jack was program director at WSM and is now in the Country Music Hall of Fame. Lou Cowan later became president of the CBS network. A publishing company controls the copyright to songs and works to get those songs recorded. The first big hit for Tree was Heartbreak Hotel by Elvis in 1956. They also published Green Green Grass a Home and the songs of Roger Miller, like King of the Road and Dang Me, and purchased the publishing company that has the songs of Willie Nelson, Harlan Howard, and Hank Cochran. Later, they bought the song catalogs of Merle Haggard and Buck Owens, as well as Acuff Rose, the publishing company that has the songs of Hank Williams, Roy Orbison, and the early Everly Brothers hits. Through a partnership with Michael Jackson, they have the song catalog of the Beatles. As we walk along Music Square West, we pass several buildings and get to the corner of Music Square West and Roy Acuff Place. Pause until we get to the corner of those streets. The building at the corner, before you cross Roy Acuff Place, is Carnival Music, a publishing and production company owned by Leanne Womack and her husband, Frank Liddell. If you look to your right, down Roy Acuff Place, you'll see a large building. That's the headquarters for the Nashville Songwriters Association International. It was formerly the studio where Alabama recorded their hits. Now, pause, look both ways, and walk across Roy Acuff Place. This studio was opened in November 1957 and is where Elvis recorded when he was in Nashville. His first recording session came in June 1958 when he was on leave from the Army. Others who recorded in this studio include Eddie Arnold, Jim Reeves, Don Gibson, the Everly Brothers, Roy Orbison, Roger Miller, Chet Atkins, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, Dolly Parton, and Hank Snow. The studio was purchased by the Mike Curb Family Foundation and has been restored. Today you can tour the studio through a ticket at the Country Music Hall of Fame. Students at Belmont University take courses here in studio production. The guitar in front of the studio has a painting of Elvis. These guitars were created by the Gibson Guitar Company and sent to various artists who painted music icons on them. At the other end of RCA Studio B is a guitar created to honor Roy Orbison. As you continue to walk along Music Square West, you'll see a large building at 30 Music Square West that was also built by RCA. Historic RCA Studio B was the Nashville headquarters for RCA, led by Chet Atkins, but that building became too small, so RCA built a larger one. Inside this building was a much larger studio. An orchestra could easily fit in here, and the offices of RCA as they grew through the 1960s and 70s and 80s. Across the street, on the west side, at 25 Music Square West, is the headquarters of Word Records, one of the largest Christian companies in the world. Among the artists who have recorded for Word are Amy Grant, George Beverly Shea, and Bill Gaither. Right after the RCA building, there used to be two small apartment buildings and an old house. In one of those apartment buildings, Chris Christopherson lived, and that's where he wrote Sunday Morning Coming Down. The old house was where Combine Publishing was located, which published the songs of Christopherson, Billy Swan, and many others. The building you see there now at 40 Music Square West belongs to Reba McEntire. Inside are her offices and a recording studio. You are on the corner of Music Square West and Chet Atkins Place. Let's continue walking south with the traffic and walk across Chet Atkins Place. Pause until you get across the street. At the corner, we see a large multi-story building at 50 Music Square West that houses a number of music businesses. If you look across Music Square West, you will see number 49, the headquarters for Great American Country. Inside that building are studios where some of the programs you see on GAC are taped. Walking along Music Square West and continuing to look across the street, you'll see the offices of Clear Channel Communications at number 55. A company that owns and programs a number of radio stations. On your left is the house which formerly housed the offices of J.D. Sumner, the bass singer who sang with Elvis on tour during the 1970s. As we continue down Music Square West, we come to the corner of Music Square West and Grand Avenue. Pause until you get to the corner. The red brick building on the west side of Grand and Music Square West is the former home of Acuff Rose Publishing Company, the first major publishing company in Nashville, formed in 1942 by Fred Rose and Roy Acuff. Diagonally across Music Square West, at 1001 16th Avenue South, you see the offices and studio of Ray Stevens. Ray's big hits include Everything is Beautiful, Guitarzan, and The Streak. Now, let's turn left on Grand and walk towards Belmont Church. Pause until you get to the corner across from the church. This church, at 60 Music Square East, is important in the history of contemporary Christian music. Here is where Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith both went to church and performed some of their earliest songs for the first time. At the corner, let's take a left and walk north, with the traffic, up Music Square East. The building on the right, number 54, used to be the offices of MCA Records, which was the label home of George Strait, Reba McEntire, and Conway Twitty. Their offices are now located downtown next to the Ryman. This building you're looking at and the one on its left both have a number of offices for music businesses. On the left, at 55 Music Square East, is Sesac, another performing rights organization. This PRO was originally formed in 1931 to collect money for songs released in the United States by European composers. On the left, as we walk up, we see a building on the left, number 47, which was the former location of the Country Corner, a tavern where Chris Christopherson was a bartender and where songwriters used to hang out. The cover picture of Waylon Jennings' album, Honky Tonk Heroes, was taken in that bar. To the right, diagonally across Music Square East at number 48, is Curb Records. Artists on Curb Records include Tim McGraw, Joe D. Messina, Winona, Rodney Atkins, and Leanne Rimes. Let's look both ways and then cross Chet Atkins Place. Pause until you get across the street. At the corner where you stand is the recording studio for Curb Records. As we walk along, the next building at number 41 is the former home of Mercury Records, which was the label for Farron Young and Roger Miller. The next building, 37 Music Square East, was the home of Cedarwood Publishing, which was owned by Jim Denny, Webb Pierce, and Carl Smith, and which published the songs of Mel Tillis and Mary John Wilkins. More recently, it became the office of Brad Paisley. Now, let's stop and look across Music Square East at 34 and 38 Music Square East. These two buildings sit side by side, but they are two separate buildings. The building on the right, 38 Music Square East, was the early headquarters for Capitol Records, the label of Buck Owens, Sonny James, and Merle Haggard back in the late 1950s and early 1960s. The original building is the front of that building, going up only one story. Hubert Long, who had a talent agency and music publishing company, owned that building but needed to expand, so he added on to that original building, which became a three-story building. Today, the top two floors of this building are the headquarters for Buddy Lee Talent, one of the major booking agencies in Nashville. A booking agency books artists in clubs, fairs, and concerts all over the United States. At 34 Music Square East, the sign on the building says the Mike Curb College of Entertainment and Music Business. This college, named after Mike Curb, is part of Belmont University and today houses faculty offices and classrooms where songwriting is taught. And in the back, the first studio built on Music Row. Remember Owen Bradley, playing piano up in the park? Well, Owen, his brother Harold, and Paul Cohen, an executive with Decca Records, bought an old house on the site in December 1954, and the next year began doing recording sessions here. That old house has been covered up now with additions. The Army made a lot of Quonset huts, a metal building that looks like a half circle during World War II. They could be assembled quickly and easily and used to store equipment, supplies, and have offices. After World War II, these buildings could be bought cheaply, and that's how Owen Bradley came to purchase this Quonset hut, which is now covered up. Owen first recorded in the basement of the old house. Songs recorded there include Bebop-A-Lula by Gene Vincent, Young Love by Sonny James, Crazy Arms by Ray Price, and Gone by Fairlin Husky. This is the studio where Buddy Holly recorded some of his earliest songs. The Quonset Hut studio was originally used for television and movie production, but by 1955 there were recording sessions in there. Johnny Cash, Ray Price, Marty Robbins, Carl Smith, Patsy Cline, Brenda Lee, Roger Miller, and many other artists. Among the songs recorded here were El Paso by Marty Robbins, Battle of New Orleans by Johnny Horton, Crazy by Patsy Cline, Flowers on the Wall by the Statler Brothers, King of the Road by Roger Miller, and Don't Take Your Guns to Town by Johnny Cash. In 1962, Columbia Records purchased this building and studio from Owen Bradley, and from this point forward it became the Nashville headquarters for CBS Records. Among the artists on their labels were George Jones, Tammy Wynette, Johnny Cash, and Marty Robbins. CBS constructed additions to their building several times and added 2 more studios. Bob Dylan, Simon & Garfunkel, Kansas, James Taylor, and others recorded in these studios. Most of the construction occurred in the 1963 to 1966 period. The guitars in the front of the building honor Sun Records, the Memphis label that did the original recordings of Elvis, Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Johnny Cash, known as the $1 Million Quartet, and another guitar honoring the original Carter family. As we walk up the sidewalk on the left side of the street, at number 35, we see EMI Publishing, an international publishing company. The side street beside 34 Music Square East is Music Circle South. If you look down that street to the left, you see the former offices and studio of Ronnie Milsap, located at number 12. Songs recorded in this studio include Stranger in My House, Lost in the 50s, Any Day Now, and There's No Getting Over Me. Next door to that is Soundstage Recording Studio, the former home of Mercury Records. In that studio, a number of hits from Tom T. Hall and the Statler Brothers were recorded. Songs recorded there include Old Dogs, Children, and Watermelon Wine, I Remember the Year That Clayton Delaney Died, both by Tom T. Hall, and Do You Remember These, and Class of 57 by the Statlers. Further down Music Circle South, at number 2, are the offices for the Country Music Association. Now, as we walk down Music Square East, at number 29 is where the offices of Capitol Records were when Garth Brooks signed with the label. As you can probably tell, many of these businesses moved several times during their time in Nashville. Currently, the offices for Capitol Records are located at the corner of West End Avenue and Murphy Road. The next building, number 27 Music Square East, is where Decca Records was located, headed by Owen Bradley. Artists on Decca included Conway Twitty, Loretta Lynn, Bill Monroe, Ernest Tubb, and Patsy Cline. Next door, at number 25, is the former home of the Wilburn Brothers offices, which is where Loretta Lynn signed her original songwriting and management contracts. Loretta appeared regularly on the Wilburn Brothers show during the 1960s. If we continue up the street, on the left or west side of the street is 21 Music Square East, and here are the offices for Warner Chappell Music Publishing. This building is the former home of Monument Records, whose artists included Roy Orbison, Chris Christopherson, Boots Randolph, and Larry Gatlin. This was the label Dolly Parton signed with in Nashville and released her first album. Looking east, down Music Circle North, you see on the right the American Federation of Musicians, local number 257 of the Musicians Union at number 11. Across Music Square East at number 20 is Warner Brothers Records. This major label is still located on Music Row. During the history of this label, they have released records by Emmylou Harris, Randy Travis, and John Anderson. At 10 Music Square East is Broadcast Music, Inc., or BMI, the first performing rights organization to set up headquarters in Nashville. They first set up an office in Nashville in the early 1950s, and in 1964 constructed this building. The parking lot next to BMI, as we walk towards the roundabout, was the first home for the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. That building housed the Hall of Fame from April 1, 1967 until December 31, 2000. It was torn down, and the new Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum, which opened in May 2001, is located at 5th Avenue South. You are now once again at Owen Bradley Park. If you look directly across the roundabout, you'll see that 16th Avenue South extends down to Broadway. However, just a short ways down 16th Avenue is Mcgavock Street on the right. If you take that right and head east on Mcgavock, you'll see a parking lot on your right where the building once stood where Elvis Presley recorded Heartbreak Hotel on his first recording session in Nashville. That same building housed the offices of Jim Owens Productions, which produced a number of television shows for TNN during the 1980s. Now, if you take a left or east on Mcgavock off of 16th, you'll see a studio on the corner. That was formerly the studio of Monument Records. In this studio, Roy Orbison recorded Oh Pretty Woman, and Chris Christopherson recorded Why Me Lord. You may walk across the roundabout or Buddy Killen Circle back to the parking lot where you parked. This is Don Cusick, and I hope you've enjoyed your Music Row walk.